Welcome, welcome, welcome once again, friends and just lovers of the planet and lovers of other human beings and life forms. And welcome once again to the Leo and Larry Show, the place that tells you the things that you need to know and the places where you need to go. Then you're in the right place, the Leo and Larry Show. Once again, I don't think have failed you yet. We have another awesome guest coming on this evening, and she's a wealth of knowledge and information. I'm sure she will inspire and encourage someone in our listening audience. And I'm talking about Freeda Cathcart, who is the director over the Soil and Conservation Department for the city of Roanoke, Virginia. And she wears many other hats and many, many other things. But welcome, 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 Freeda Cathcart. And tell the audience something about yourself, what you do, your past, and let's just get started and have a really awesome and exciting conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be here with you today. I know you're always doing such good work out there. Everywhere you go, you're doing good work, stirring up good
Thank
trouble. Um, I did want to make sure that there's not a misunderstanding. I'm not a director of a department for Roanoke City. I'm an elected official. I'm a district director representing Roanoke City on the Soil and Water
you.
Conservation Board. So I want to make
Oh,
sure
I'm sorry. That's
that
right. You're
it's okay.
elected, right? The
Just don't.
people, the people's choice.
I'm the people's choice, yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't get paid either. I'm a volunteer, and I'm happy to volunteer to do it because I think
Mm,
protecting our soil and water is a very important responsibility and civic duty. So I'm glad to serve in that area. I'm also an energy investor, so I spend a lot of time trying to see what's the healthiest choices for energy. I'm the team coordinator of our Mothers Out Front Roanoke team. We do a lot of climate justice work. So I do a lot of different things, and a lot of them intersect with each other when it comes to the environment and human rights and decency.
mhm. Awesome. Yeah. So you've been involved with so many different things, but I'm interested in when you say you're an energy investor. What exactly is an energy investor?
Well, I think a lot of people might be surprised to find out they might be energy investors as well. If you look at your portfolio, your 401ks or individual retirement accounts, the IRAs or pensions, utilities have generally been a conservative investment, something solid that people could count on that had a modest return on their investment. And it used to be considered a kind of community patriotic thing to invest in your local utility because that is how communities originally got power, was everybody chipping in and getting shares and creating these little local utilities. But over time they merged one into the other and turned into these big conglomerate corporations, which then these investment portfolios invest in. um, so a lot of people probably are tied into that, whether you're a school teacher in a public school or a police officer. You might be an energy investor too. And that's part of the work that I try and do is to educate people about that. They have power to participate in the discussions about how utilities create the energy that they generate and how much they charge people for it if they're being fair with what they've been entrusted with. And it's been my experience as a Dominion shareholder, a Dominion Energy shareholder, that I found that the company has had some questionable investments. And I've engaged with them about that, and as well as with other shareholders. There's other shareholder activists that care about how the company is behaving, how they're treating people. And we've made some differences, some progress. There's a whole lot more to do, but the more people that get involved, that are empowered to join the movement for accountability and transparency, the more results we get.
So we could have an example, say, of a utility. I mean, this is public information, so I'm not picking on anyone, but Duke Energy had a huge problem with coal ash and how they were storing coal ash and their coal ash ponds, etc. And there were a lot of folks who got sick from inhaling coal ash, either transported or stored in these so-called coal ash ponds. And and I know that they actually made a settlement. They handle the coal ash bonds differently now. And part of that had to do with some investors speaking out. So people don't realize that you don't always have to demonstrate or make a loud noise. Your money can speak for you. Isn't that correct?
That's right. Um, because so much of the way that business has evolved has been focusing on the bottom line. But how does that bottom line achieved? What is your responsibility if you are conducting business that are making people sick? And there's litigation that then holds you accountable for conducting business in a way that makes people sick, in which you have to pay. First of all, you want to try and avoid doing business so that you don't want to make anybody sick.
Mhm.
So it should always be about being a good community partner, and being aware. Unfortunately, there's some corporations that seem like they purposely um, ignore that decency of how they should operate and are just thinking about the bottom line. So if you are dealing with a company that's just dealing with the bottom line, you can make a cold-hearted business like argument or persuasion that if they don't conduct themselves responsibly, and if they are going around making people sick with coal ash, then they're going to be paying a lot of money for it. That's going to hurt their bottom line. So they shouldn't do it. It's not my favorite way to go, but it is a very effective way to go if the other way doesn't work. Like you were saying, like with protests and demonstrations, and they're still ignoring and not listening, then sitting down with the numbers and proving to them that what they're doing is irresponsible and they're going to lose money, often works. And that's pretty much where we are with fracked gas and methane right now, is trying to get the word to the companies that the ones that are building out the new infrastructure for methane, fracked gas, or otherwise known as natural gas. I don't like using that term because it's ridiculous to say natural gas. I mean, yes, it's generated naturally in nature, but it is an accelerant of climate change, even worse than carbon. I think it's like 80 times worse or something. But it's like pouring kerosene on a fire. And it's been really hot recently. And I think the heat is getting people's attention. This argument about climate change, whether it's real or not, I don't hear people really arguing about that as much as what are we going to do about where we are right now.
Yes. Yes. And you mentioned a couple of things. So for some of our audience members who may not know what frack gas is, why don't we start off talking about what frack gas is and um, and also the impacts of methane that comes from pipelines, right?
Sure. So there is, like, when they're drilling for oil, like refine to make gasoline that goes in our car, there is gas that they can capture at that time that often is referred to as natural gas. It's methane. But there's this other technique called fracked gas, and that's where they drill specifically into the earth a certain distance and then go horizontally. And this is in shale. It's in certain I'm gonna have trouble, geological formations, um,
Yes.
of these layers of rock, shale rock, and they'll drill down and then they'll inject. And this is really troublesome. What they're injecting with the chemicals, they've been able to hide what they've been injecting. And that's really important because lots of times when you drill down and you're injecting these chemicals into these layers of rock, you can be hitting water tables and aquifers at the same
Mhm.
time. And there's evidence of that. I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. Is it Gaslit or something? Where
Gaslands 1,
yeah,
Gaslands 2 by a great fellow that I met, Josh Fox. And for our listening audience, the Gasland 1, Gasland 2 are free and they are on YouTube and as well as on, your Fire Stick or something. But Freeda is absolutely right. They show farms in other areas where these companies have come in, drilled through the shale, hit their water, and the people can't drink the water, they can't bathe in it. And there's one shot where they turn the water faucet on and flick a cigarette lighter next to it, and the water coming out of the faucet just burst into flames. So that's Gaslands 1 and 2, Frida. Go ahead. I just want to
well,
make sure they knew the
I
name and where to go see the video.
well, I'm excited because I saw Gasland One. They actually Josh came to Roanoke and there was I think it might have been a premiere or it was early on when they were launching it. But I didn't know that there was a follow-up movie. So I'm gonna go and watch that too because I think he does an excellent job explaining, what the situation is, why it's happening, and why you should care.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if entertaining is the correct word, but it goes quickly. At least
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
compelling. Um, so,
And
um,
so they use this gas once they've captured it, and they pump it through pipelines, right?
well, right, but so when they're extracting it from the earth, they're already having trouble with it, part of it going up into the atmosphere, containing it. And then they're supposed to put it in pipelines, but the pipelines have been found to leak. And now there's a new satellite tool that's been launched. It's got the acronym of MARS, MARS, but I don't remember what those words are. But anyhow, the point is that there is a satellite system that's up there now that can monitor where the methane is coming from and hold companies accountable and be able to see where the hot spots are, where the methane's being released. Because it's really important to see that. It's amazing when you see footage of cameras that can capture the methane in the air, how bad it is. And I don't know if your audience will be surprised like this or just shake their heads. Yep, that sounds about like what normally happens. But what they're finding is that there's more pollution where there's marginalized communities, Black and Brown people seem to be in the areas that are getting the worst emissions and the pollutions and the cancer and the asthma and the bad health conditions. There's I think it's Louisiana, they call it Cancer Alley, um, where there's all these fossil fuel refineries and things going on. So from beginning to end, um, when I'm talking about end, I'm talking about your gas stoves in your house.
Mhm.
There's emissions coming out then, and those hoods don't take them out either. So
No.
this nonsense about they're trying to take away your gas stoves is they're trying to protect your health and save your life. They're trying to say that this is a public health hazard. And it's one thing when you don't know any better, but once you do know, you have a responsibility to tell the public, like, you don't want to do this. Nobody's coming to take people's stoves out of their houses, but what they're trying to do is incentivize people to switch on, say, like, we'll give you a credit, we'll help you get another stove, like a convection stove, where your health isn't in danger if you get rid of your gas stove. So that's really
Right.
important. That's a bunch of nonsense that anybody's coming to take your stove. But we do want people to understand the dangers of the gas stoves, and hopefully we'll use the credits or find ways to get rid of their gas stove and switch to something else.
Yes, what you're talking about is that the U.S. Department of Energy and IRS are giving tax credits to people and rebates if they switch away from gas stoves that emit methane, which is very dangerous, And then a lot of these pipelines, you said that there's more leakage of methane from the pipelines in black and brown communities because that's where they run the pipelines, right?
Well, right. There, some of it's running to pipelines there. The pipelines are pretty long, so they go through all sorts of communities. But more like at the beginning and at the end, there'll be clusters there. The air compressor stations, like so. For instance, with the Mountain Valley Pipeline, there's at the end where they're trying to make a hub to go down to what's called Southgate, um, down to North Carolina. There's an air compressor station. Now they could have picked different places to put the air compressor station, but they put it right in the middle of a black communities. Um,
Mm-hmm.
commu- that's there that already had two compressor stations already there. So now they want to put a third one there. And so the people rose up and have so far been able to stop it. It's still an ongoing battle down there that we have to be vigilant about. But but that's to show people that once you realize what they're doing and you speak up and you challenge it, you can make a difference. And say that this is not fair. It's not fair for one community to take everybody else's pollution and be suffering with asthma and cancer. Um, and frankly, it would be better for no community to do that. We have better alternatives that are cheaper and cleaner than using things like gas at this time. I mean, we need to you know start transitioning quickly away from that. Um, so building out new gas infrastructure or gambling on new nuclear projects like these small nuclear reactors that have proven to be very expensive and don't even know if they're going to like how expensive it's going to be. And we already know about the problems with the toxins at the beginning and end, again, mining and which communities are impacted harmfully more than others, the black and brown marginalized communities. Um, it's just not fair when you have these wonderful new technologies, geothermal, solar, wind, the battery storage. Before it used to be like, oh, but what happens when the battery storage is just phenomenal how they've been able to the new technology when it comes to the batteries. Texas and California are leading the way with the battery storage, which is interesting, considering that a lot of people would think of California as what would be considered a liberal blue state and Texas as a conservative red state. And they're
Mm-hmm.
both leading the charge, and more power to them. We all should watch and do what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It should not be a partisan issue. It should be all hands on deck. We've got to get this done.
Well, yes, because cancer, asthma, climate impacts, hurricanes, tornadoes. I tell people often, those things do not care what color you are, what your religion is, or your party affiliation. And I think when people hear a lot of times that a lot of these polluting facilities are in black and brown communities, they think this is just a racial issue, but it's not. And climate impacts are teaching us those things. But let's talk about methane a little bit too, because everybody's always talking about carbon. We have to reduce the carbon. We have to reduce fossil fuel emissions, but methane is a lot worse than even carbon, right?
It is, and going back to California and Texas right now, and perhaps why they are moving so quickly as they are, is if you think about California's on fire right now. They've been having a lot of
Mm-hmm.
trouble with the heat and the fire, and Texas is underwater, right, from
Mm-hmm.
Beryl. Oh,
Yes.
I'm So, so I think they got the memo, and they're large landmass states too, right? Like you were
Hmm.
saying, with this climate change, it doesn't. When you get these large extreme weather events, it doesn't just affect Black and Brown people. Suddenly, everybody is either losing their homes to fire or being flooded out, and then suddenly you know, they're like, "Oh, this is not good. How can we stop this?" And it's like, "Well, stop using methane is the easiest way to make it stop sooner because that's doing the most harm quicker. So
Hmm.
start."
Yes, yes. From what I remember is that uh, a lot of methane in the air actually causes the planet to heat up even more, which means that more methane gets released, especially up in the North Pole, Alaska, where there's a lot of methane trapped under the ice from, decaying particles, bones, animals, plants.
I think you're talking
And
about the
when we,
permafrost.
yeah, the permafrost. So when we
Yeah.
lose the permafrost, even more methane is released into the air, in addition to the methane releases we're getting from them drilling for the gas, leakages from the pipelines, and et cetera. Mhm.
Exactly. And there's certain things in nature where there is methane going to be released, cows belching, permafrost, being released as the permafrost melts and that gas is released, which so sometimes people will be dismissive of like, well, it doesn't matter. Well, yes, it does matter because we have to be responsible for the fact that we're the ones that created the situation with the human, escalation of the methane emissions. So we should be the first ones to turn it off and try and bring balance back to it.
Mhm. Yeah,
There's always going to be some methane in nature.
mhm.
We don't need to encourage it by drilling and releasing more of it and transporting it all over the place and releasing it all over the place.
And you
So
mentioned the Mountain Valley Pipeline too. And when I met you, you were fighting the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, uh, which that was a great victory for people. And why don't you talk about the Mountain Valley Pipeline and what dangers it presents, and then how folks have also been able to delay it or stop it.
sure. So yes, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, that was an amazing victory, and meeting you and so many other people, leaders in the community. I should mention that I know both of us are climate reality leaders as well, out there leading the charge, educating people, like we
Hmm.
are today. And when you unite together, you really can make a big impact. And the same, we were doing that with the Mountain Valley Pipeline. We've been fighting it for years, um, and been there was more of a focus on fighting it through the courts than the economic um, thing. Whereas with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, we were fighting it both in the courts in protecting the environment as well as going after them economically. And I think that really helped make a difference. The Mountain Valley Pipeline, it's been hard to get the movement to really focus on the economics of it. We're more focused on the courts, which was being successful until there was this deal that the Republicans forced in Congress. Having to do with the debt ceiling bill, which had nothing to do with um, where the pipeline was going, but it
Yeah.
ended up being one of those political bargaining chips that they wanted to attach to must pass legislation. And it stunned everybody. I mean, I don't know how often the government needs to do things where we're or the courts or whatever do things where we're stunned, or we should not get used to it. That's for sure. But they passed a bill exempting the Mountain Valley Pipeline from the court cases that were pending in the Fourth Circuit that had stopped it. They just
Mhm.
said, just forget that and just get it done. So they railroaded it through. Right now, there's gas flowing through the pipeline, and we're still fighting it. Now we're fighting it economically. There's really a focus on that. We're trying to get the word on out to people about it because there's this little utility in Roanoke called Roanoke Gas. That's a contract from getting the gas from Mountain Valley Pipeline, and their parent company is one of the owners of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. So Roanoke is the poorest city in Virginia, and that's the utility. Roanoke Gas provides a lot of heat and energy to schools, the hospital, businesses, churches, families. Um, and lo and behold, they're put out a notice they're getting ready to raise rates and charge more, even though the advertisements for gas was that it was cheaper and cleaner. Well, it's not cheaper when you put it through a real expensive pipeline. So now we're leading the charge. Our Mothers Out Front Roanoke team is leading the charge, spreading the word that they're trying to raise these late rates and pass this cost on to us, and we're not going to take it because it's not fair to pass their bad business decisions cost onto their customers when there's perfectly reasonable, cheaper gas through these other pipelines that already existed, that it was all just a scam and we're not going to pay for it. Their shareholders should pay for it. It's not our fault they can't make money for it. So that hearing is going to be in November. And why people who don't live in Roanoke or Virginia should care about this issue wherever you are is because probably somewhere near you, some utilities thinking that they want to build a pipeline or a gas plant. And the only reason why utilities want to do that in this day and age is because of the Natural Gas Act, which guarantees a certain rate of return no matter what. And it's a high rate of return, like somewhere between 10 to 14%. So it doesn't matter how much it costs to build the pipeline or how much it costs to build the plant. You have the government's permission to pass that cost on to your customers to get that return, unless the customers agitate and say, we didn't need that gas, we're not going to pay for it. So we're hoping to be successful in defeating this rate increase, which is send a chilling effect throughout the gas industry that they can't just willy-nilly build these projects and expect to just pass the cost on to their customers, that we will push back, we will not take it, and then they're just stuck with the money, that they're just not going to be able to recapture their costs, and it's a bad business decision, and they shouldn't be doing those things anymore. So just check where you are and see if there's something coming along like that. Get in touch with Mothers Out Front and other organizations like the Sierra Club or Justice First to say, we're not going to take this. Can you help us stop this? And we can share tips. We all need to work together as a team so we're not ripped off and we're getting energy as healthy and clean and cheaply as possible.
That's because right now in South Carolina, going through the PD area where we live, where this radio station is, Dominion Energy is expanding their pipelines. And I know it's running through this county for Pamplico and down to the Atlantic Beach area. So this should be a subject that everyone listening is paying close attention to. And also with the Mountain Valley Pipeline, um, it runs through some natural areas. It goes through some federal land and wetlands and some areas that we should be supporting, that the federal government states are supposed to protect these areas. Is that correct?
Yes, it goes through national forest land, which has endangered species on it. That's where we had stopped it in the court. We used the Endangered Species Act as well as the Forest Act and the Clean Water Act to stop it. And it should have been stopped. It should have never been approved anyhow because the scientists and the engineers said it wasn't possible to build a route through that territory without doing irreparable harm to the water and all those things that are supposed to protect our environment. They were told that, and they just said that, well, they had their own scientists and engineers that disagreed with them. And then lo and behold, a lot of people, including myself, citizen monitors, got out there while they were building and recorded them polluting the water, because the scientists and engineers on our side happened to be right about what was going to happen. So we documented it, sent it to the lawyers. The lawyers took it to court. We won. And then Congress said, never mind, we don't care. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, so, but
And
here we
you
are.
made, yeah, you made a very important statement when you said that these bad business decisions are hurting local and state economies. And one would think that, they would learn from bad business decisions. We have an example in South Carolina where they want to build these nuclear facilities. It was called VC Summer. And they spent billions of dollars. This was South Carolina ENG, South Carolina Electric and Gas, and they kept going. And a coalition of people got together, small business, Chamber of Commerce, AARP, a really amazing mix of people you wouldn't usually see together, environmentalists, conservationists, and they were able to get the Public Service Commission to say that SCE&G couldn't keep raising uh, the rates on their customers to pay for these nuclear facilities. And when that happened, and Westinghouse, which builds nuclear facilities, that portion filed bankruptcy, and they went to their shareholders, SCE&G, and asked them to pay more money. The shareholders said no. And so what happened is South Carolina Electric and Gas, which was the only Fortune 400 company in South Carolina, went out of business. Dominion stepped in.
Yeah.
But those customers who are now Dominion customers are still paying for those billions of dollars um, for that bad business deal. So I just want to emphasize what you said about, companies make bad business decisions, and then the people who pay for it are the customers, right?
Well, the customers, but that is how I became a Dominion shareholder, is because I was a shareholder, and it was the South Carolina Gas and Electric ended up becoming SCANA, and that's because decades, probably a century ago, my grandfather invested in that little utility when he lived in Columbia, South Carolina,
Mhm.
um, and the shareholders lost in that too. Our dividend checks stopped for a couple of years. I remember one woman at the shareholder meeting whose pension was primarily in SCANA. She'd been worked her whole life for SCANA, and she used to get like $6,000 a quarter to live on. Suddenly went to zero, if you can
Mm.
imagine retirement. Um, so everybody got hurt in that. But in my viewpoint, it is the shareholders that are responsible, that are the owners of the company. It's not the customer's fault when something goes south, and that when something does go bad, the owners have to be responsible and take it on the chin. And that's where Dominion came along and did, buy up the company. And so then the shares got converted, and the dividends started again. But now Dominion is doing nonsensical things. Back in 2022, I carried a resolution at their shareholder meeting to and require them to do a report about whether or not their natural gas investments were good investments or not, or if they needed to get rid of them or stop doing them because it's called stranded assets to avoid them just becoming worthless.
Mm,
And they created a report, and it's a pretty fluffy report. And then to hear that they're still doing these projects, like in South Carolina, is just irritating. Yes,
mm,
and there's some shareholders that we're trying to circle back to that and hold their hold them accountable for the reporting. So so this is getting kind of into the weeds where most of your listeners probably don't want to go, but just to say that if you are interested in these financial wonky type of things, there are people that are like geeks when it comes to this. I'm one of them that's happy to help um, teach you about it or support you in holding these type of companies accountable. It's not that complicated when you get into it, but I don't want to take up too much time or discourage people um, by starting to go down rabbit holes where they don't know what I'm talking about because I and they aren't able to ask me questions like, well, what did you mean about this? But there are ways to hold companies accountable. Um, so we can all support each other in those ways to
mm,
learn. I didn't know this off the top of my head. There were people who helped me. I all I knew was I didn't think it was good.
mm,
I wanted to
mm.
make a difference. And then I met people who taught me how I could make a difference. And so now I'm
Yeah.
doing that work and happy to teach others.
And I think it's important that people do uh that I think it's important that people are not become knowledgeable of the fact that hey, you need to check and see what investments do you have with your 401k, etc. If you hear on the news that the coal industry or industry is being phased out or there's new technology and another and a company is starting to shut down or fail and you look in your 401k and you're invested in that company or a company that's doing harm in your community or to nature, it's really important that you wind up not losing your retirement money, correct? Because you're invested in the wrong in the wrong companies.
Oh yeah. I mean, that woman at that shareholder meeting, I mean, I think she worked as a secretary for decades for that company, you know, and having $6,000 every quarter is a nice retirement. That's like $2,000 a month. She wasn't living high on the hog, you know.
Mm-hmm,
Um, so to suddenly lose that, I mean, it just turned her world upside down. And like I was saying, usually utilities and these type of companies were safe bets.
mm-hmm,
It was a good solid investment to make that you could rely on and count on. It wasn't like this pie in the sky, I'm going to try and get rich quick type of thing. It was just this steady thing that when you got older, you could retire and rely on it. And now, because of their risky behavior and getting into these speculative investments with the utilities, it's making it where they're not being as reliable as they were before, and that's dangerous, not just for the shareholders who own it, but for the people who rely on those companies for power. That's the
mm-hmm.
other thing crazy about Texas is that they're not regulated. Um,
Right, right. And that's why because of the frost and because of what just happened with this hurricane, because they're not regulated and they're not controlled, they don't really have the best things in places. That's why when their system fails, it's just horrible. You have people now who have no electricity, 1 million people. They're saying it may go down to a 500,000 this weekend, but they may not. Oh my God, that's electric. That's a thunderstorm for our listening audience. More climate impacts. Um, but what folks need to realize is that these companies actually, can have the power to what they're doing. of life over death. They have made up makeshift hospital beds for the people who are suffering from the extreme heat because there's no electricity, so there's no air conditioning, there's no fans or anything right now in Texas. So these decisions that are made politically, that are being made in corporate boardrooms, actually impacting people's lives, whether or not their homes remain standing, or all of those things. So I think it's very important to our listening audience that you pay attention to what companies are doing what with your money, with your investment dollars, and also with the money that you spend to pay your bills every day. But I want, and what you said too, Freeda, was important because with the shift towards renewable energy, EV charging stations, you mentioned geothermal, all of these things that these utilities that used to make a whole lot of money now have competitors. And so they're coming up with all of this new technology that is supposed to reduce methane and um, carbon being in the air, etc. And so, Frida, you mentioned that they have all this new unproven science like carbon capture, and you want to address any of those?
Well, I'm skeptical about the carbon capture, but before I go down that, I just wanted to say, like, I bet you there are people in Texas that have power that the people that can afford to have generators, which is
Oh yeah.
gets back to another environmental justice thing, where when these extreme weather events happen, they disproportionately hurt poor communities and marginalized communities than it does other people as well. And that is really where the people need to unite and rise up. Because as long as there's some people who are making the decisions of owners that are being comfortable, that's not fair. People need to hold them accountable. When it comes to carbon capture, it depends on the carbon capture. Um, because like if you're talking about a landfill or water treatment plant, sewage treatment plant that's capturing methane or carbon that's like naturally being generated because of the breakdown that happens from sewage being broke down, yes, that is good to do. But this idea about just capturing carbon and piping it places, that is very skeptical if that's going to be a good investment. It seems like that might be another pipeline type of scam, trying to just make money where it's still going to leak and have problems when there's other things that can be done, such as the alternatives, the sustainable, the geothermal, the solar, the wind, the hydro, the battery storage. It's not, they always say like it's not sexy, but energy efficiency. One of one of the ways we can help reduce all the energy emissions is by reducing how much energy we need through, just the basic insulation and turning our thermostats one way or another, getting kind of used to wearing less clothes in the summer and wearing more clothes in the winter. Things like
Mhm.
that make a difference.
Yes. What time you wash clothes? You washing them during peak hours, when you get charged the most for using electricity, or you washing them on non-peak hours where your rate actually is reduced. But we have about
Exactly.
5 minutes. Oh my God, the time went by so quickly. And I want you to talk a little bit about Evan Springs and some other places because dealing with energy and utilities are not all that you do, right? So do you think you can, like, in about a minute or two, really quickly kind of talk about Evan Springs and what is going on in that community?
Sure. So Evans Springs is this beautiful place in Roanoke City of about 150 acres that's wetlands inside the city. Um, and so just to let you all know, Roanoke is in the mountains. It's not near the beach. So having wetlands inland is a big deal. And it hasn't been developed because it's wetlands. It is in the section of the city that's considered the poorest section of the city. It's also the one that has the highest population of African Americans or Black people that are there. And there has been the city's been trying to develop the land to like, and this part of the city also has the worst heat island effect, which means that it has lost most of its tree canopy. It has the worst pollution in the city. It has the worst rates of asthma and other things that are happening there. And it has the highest heat index in the city. It has the highest rates of gun violence and other health concerns. Um, so they need those trees. They need that 150 acres of trees because the trees help keep that part cool. It helps to clean the air. And it would be a real tragedy to lose those trees and those wetlands. Plus, it has to do with flood resiliency because the trees, the wetlands soak up water that helps protect the people downstream from there from being flooded as well, where there's another Black community. So this is an environmental justice issue that people have been working up. And this is tied into what we were talking about when we talk about methane increasing the heat and how that affects people. Then as it gets hotter, it more adversely affects the people in the community surrounding Evans Springs and makes Evans Springs that much more valuable to keep as it is, to keep it as a cooling place. How did I do, Rev? Did I
Oh
hit
yeah,
the?
you did great, and thank you for that. 'Cause we have some heat islands here with the extreme heat that we've been going through. I think it was like 15, 16 states. That were 150 million people that were under extreme heat advisory, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And so, thank you for that because that's an issue we're going to be dealing with here and I'm sure across the country. So, running out of time, we have to have you back. You got to let us know how things work out with the Mountain Valley Pipeline as well as with Evan Springs. But, well, folks, another wonderful Leo and Larry show with another wonderful guest who is, as I said, is so knowledgeable and can help you and you too with some of the things that are going on with your community. So, Freeda
Do you want me
Cathcart,
to give them the my contact information in case
yes,
people want? Okay.
yes,
So
that's what I can ask. Mhm.
my name is Freeda, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I love talking to you, and hopefully people learned some things today. So my name is Freeda. It's spelled Freeda. And you can reach me at my email address. It's contactfreeda@gmail.com. So contact CONTACT. Freeda is FREEDA @gmail.com. And I'd be happy to help anybody who's interested in joining our movement for environmental justice and protecting our earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Frida Cathcart. And keep up the great work. And so if you want to meet, if you want to reach me, you know how you can do it. You can go to info at newalphacdc.com. Don't forget to go to our website, www.newalphacdc.com. And you can reach me at the church where I'm still privileged to preach. And that's Kingdom Living Temple, 705 South Irby Street, Florence, South Carolina. And the phone number is 843-799-0740. And so until next week, this time, if there are things that you need to know and places where you need to go, remember, it's the Leo and Larry Show. God bless you.